It's about to start chucking it down. I've decided to film these videos outside because I feel like it just looks a bit more like cinematic. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it looks better with the van in the background. But whilst I'm now sat outside in the rain, I'm thinking I should just be sat indoors. Okay. About 30 seconds after that clip finished, I got maybe a minute into filming the video and it started chucking it down. And I mean, like, really chucking it down. So you're not getting the video outside, you're gonna get it sat in my living room. There comes a stage in businesses where you think that the next purchase is going to fix everything. It's like the first revolutionary change that comes along. So it could be a better setup, better equipment, just something that makes the business feel a lot more professional. Now, for us, that came in the form of our first ever van. So if you're new here, this is part of a much wider series where I'm documenting the entire Bingai journey from the beginning to where we are now. Not the polished version, just the real one. And this stage mattered more than I realised at the time. Everything's beautiful with hindsight, and I didn't realise some of the lessons that this was going to teach me. So, up until then, everything had been done out of the back of our cars. If you haven't watched the previous episode to this, I'll link it at the top of the description. Small 150 litre tanks, battery-powered pressure washers, scrubbing and scratching bins by hand. So, in our heads, the first van, this was the logical step that was going to change everything. More water, more power, and ultimately more output. More bins cleaned, faster growth, essentially. So we bought it was a little Volkswagen Caddy. Anyone that's followed me long enough on social media will remember the little Caddy Maxi. And we bought this purely because we thought this would be a good van. We thought Volkswagen, my dad had a Volkswagen Caddy at the time. We just thought this is a great option. So it felt massive and it felt good to be getting set up slightly more professionally. So this felt like the moment that it became a real business. We started fitting it out straight away. We got a 400 litre tank, a petrol powered pressure washer from, I think it was from Machine Mart, and we spent about £200. So basic plumbing, all done ourselves, and at the time we genuinely thought that we'd cracked it. Compared to what we had been using, this felt like a massive upgrade and we were really excited. So this is where, looking back, it gets quite funny. Around this time, we'd started picking up little bits of advice online, not proper guidance, just fragments of information. People talking about how everybody recycles water in the bin cleaning industry. Like, this is just the done thing. Like, you recycle the wastewater in order to have more water to clean more bins. Like, that's just how it was done. No explanation, no context, just statements. People that had been doing it for decades, this is the way it's done, and that's it, kind of thing. So when we bought this pressure washer, we genuinely believed that we'd also solved that problem. Now, it came with what they called a filter, and when I say filter, I mean it was literally the size of probably half a litre bucket with holes in it. Like, it wasn't a filter. It was not going to do the job. But that was it. And somehow in our heads, we genuinely thought that this is how it's done. This is how we are going to recapture filthy bin water, running it back through this plastic tub and magically cleaning 100 plus bins a day. Now, of course, it didn't work like that, but we didn't know that yet, because at that stage, we weren't having any real conversations with anyone who could say, yeah, that's not how this is done, lads, and here's why, or to point us in the right direction. We were filling the gaps ourselves. So looking back now, this was our first proper lesson in false progression, because although the van looked better, the actual output of the business barely improved. In fact, it probably went backwards from cleaning out the back of our cars. The pressure washer wasn't particularly reliable, wastewater was still a constraint, and setup and clean down time were eaten into the day far more than we realised. So yes, we had a van, but the bottlenecks hadn't been removed, and this is where something else became glaringly obvious to us at the beginning. We didn't actually know what good looked like, and around this time we started trying to find guidance. So for context, for the point of the story, at this point no social media exists, the Bingai doesn't exist. This is quite literally, we're fumbling our way through it in the first 12 months. We joined Facebook groups for wheelie bin cleaning business owners, we read posts, we scrolled comments, we looked for advice, we asked for advice, and what we quickly realised is that bin cleaning was, and still is, quite a dark horse industry. It's very old school, very guarded, and to be honest, not particularly welcoming to newcomers, at least in our experience. Especially younger business owners, especially novices, especially to young lads that were trying to clean bins out the back of their cars. Like, this was a big no-no, it's not going to work, lads. There was a lot of noise, there was a lot of opinion, very little clarity. You wouldn't get a fair play, lads, nice try, but why don't you try this instead? You wouldn't get context, you wouldn't get nuance, just fragments of advice, usually without any explanation whatsoever. Now, it's important to say that this was with the exception of a few people, and that distinction does matter because the only advice that actually helped us didn't come from posts, comments, or courses. It came from conversations, real conversations, phone calls, back and forth, real operators explaining why they did things in a certain way. Now, I'm not going to name anyone, but for those initial conversations, we are still incredibly grateful, and we wouldn't have made it to this point if it weren't for these conversations. It was these conversations that were rare, but they were invaluable. They helped us understand where we were wasting time, why our setup wasn't scaling, and why buying better equipment doesn't necessarily mean better results. So that was a big shift because up until then, we were making decisions completely in isolation, guessing and copying little bits of advice that we'd seen online, mostly in Facebook groups, trying to piece together a system without ever really having the full picture. The first van taught us something important, not necessarily about equipment, but about decision making. Progress doesn't come from more information, it comes from clear thinking, and clearer thinking usually comes from proximity to people that have already been where you want to go. Now, at the time, we didn't have that environment. We paid for it with time, money, and frustration. Those questions changed everything, but not because we were suddenly having all the answers, but at that point, we weren't sitting there and thinking like experienced business owners. We weren't talking about inputs, outputs, or systems. Most of the time, the questions that we were asking were much simpler than this. We were genuinely just asking, why are we running out of water again? Why does this take so long? Why does it feel harder than it should? Have we made a backward step by buying a van? We didn't realise it at this point, but those weren't technical questions. They were just simple business questions. We were slowly learning how to think in terms of flow, time, capacity, and constraints. Not because someone taught us, but because the business forced us into these questions. Now, I think this is a really, really important point to make because these mistakes weren't detours, they were part of the process. Costly at times, frustrating, but absolutely necessary, because this is often how people actually learn to think like business owners, by feeling where things break before they understand why they break. Now, for context, this is quite important because anyone that's been following me long enough knows that I quite controversially will tell people just get started and connect the dots as you go, as opposed to more experienced advice might be you need exactly this equipment, this is exactly what you need to do. But most lessons in business are learned from trial and error, and you're not going to learn anything unless you actually take action with something. From this point on, the business stopped being about buying things and started being about designing systems, and that's where things started to get a little heavier, but also more interesting. So in the next video, I'll talk about exactly what happened next and explore the equipment choices we made in even more depth. So for those that ever ask me questions about what goes into a van setup, how you recycle water, I'm going to break it down in the next video. I'm also going to look at why hiring before we were ready nearly cost us everything. So not many people actually know that I've already got experience with employing staff, and it taught us a lot of deep lessons. I'll explore how the business started demanding better decisions, not just harder work. This was the stage where the foundations were either going to crack or they were going to get stronger, and that's why I felt the need to put this YouTube video in the middle of this series, and everything that came later was built on this platform. If you're a business owner in the exterior cleaning world, albeit bin cleaning, exterior cleaning, pressure washing, car detailing, any type of home service based business, make sure you check out the home service business room linked in the description. Everyone is more than welcome. Even if you haven't started a business yet, these conversations will help. As always, thank you for your ongoing support, and I look forward to seeing you in the next.